Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you can tell by the thumbnail, today we're going to take a look at 15 of the worst NES games. So, what makes an NES game bad or constitutes being on the worst list? I would think if it doesn't work, if you can't finish it, if it's too short, if it's hard or unfair, if the game mechanics are so broken that you just can't play it, or on the flip side, if it's way too easy and short. I think it's part of all of these points, and moreover, if it's just a bad experience and you just never want to put the cartridge back in the NES system, that's a pretty good indicator of a game that should be on the worst list. Now, of course, it's going to be subjective to pass judgment on what's quote-unquote the worst of anything, but I did put time into looking at several top 10, 15, and 20 lists. I also took into consideration if they were ports of arcade games, the ones that were designed to be quarter eaters. I'm also only counting licensed games, so you're not going to see Little Red Hood, Wally Bear, Bible Adventures, or Action 52 showing up on this list. These are not going to be ranked, just numbered, so feel free to do that down in the comments. With all that out of the way, let's get started and look at 15 of the worst NES games. Number 15, Bad Street Brawler. So this golden-aged beat-em-up seems to be very simple at first glance, but Bad Street Brawler proves that these type of games can easily take a wrong turn fast. It was designed to be used with the NES Power Glove, so this game's nearly unplayable controls make it a frustrating experience. With confusing visuals and unsatisfying gameplay, it makes you question how the industry survived for so long, how more peripherals came out, and how they made any more beat-em-ups. Next on the list is Tag Team Wrestling. Now, making quality action games in the 80s was likely a challenging task, but this particular game takes it to a whole new level of disappointment. It's not just bad, it's practically broken. If you tried playing it without any prior experience, you'll find yourselves getting repeatedly defeated with no chance to fighting back. The main culprit behind this frustration is the messed up control scheme. With only 2 buttons for different attacks, executing the moves you actually want become nearly impossible. It turns the simple task of pinning down your opponent into an absolute nightmare. Next up, the Uncanny X-Men. So this game had so much potential, but unfortunately it falls short in every aspect. It's a shame because it could have been a contender for the worst superhero game ever too, even surpassing Superman 64. The characters, although beloved, are unbalanced, making it hard to choose between them. Why would anyone pick Wolverine with his close combat abilities when Cyclops can at least attack from a distance? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Navigating through the confusing levels with your useless partner AI is a nightmare. The entire game is a mess, making even more of your favorite X-Men look weak and disappointing. By the time you finish it, if you do, you might find yourself disliking most of them. Back to the Future 2 and 3. So the initial Back to the Future game for the NES wasn't great, but at least it followed the basic structure of the movie. Well, kind of. However, Back to the Future Part 2 and 3 takes the cake for being the most confusing use of time travel in entertainment history. Honestly, I still can't figure out what this game wants from me. It's supposed to be a time-traveling adventure that covers the events of the last 2 Back to the Future movies, but I challenge you to play it for more than 15-20 minutes without feeling frustrated and asking yourself, what am I supposed to do? It's not just poorly designed for an 8-bit game, it's also incredibly unenjoyable. I feel bad for the people that rented this for the weekend back in the day. Next, Ghostbusters. Now this game is truly a disaster when it came to coding for the NES. From the repetitive ghost catching to the stair climbing, it's all mindless and tedious button mashing. The worst part is waiting to enter the Zool building, such a waste of time. You can play endlessly if you don't know what you're doing, but if you can't get in, you're stuck. And the final boss? Total letdown. Overall, this game is a complete mess and easily one of the worst on the system. At least they kinda got the theme song right. Number 10, Dragon's Lair. Now, I'll admit it must have been quite a challenge to bring a game like Dragon's Lair, which was known for its innovative combination of FMV visuals and QuickTime event gameplay, to the humble NES. And if this port is any indication, it seems like they didn't quite succeed, am I right? I can't think of any other game that frustrates players as much as Dragon's Lair does right from the start. I'm willing to bet that a whopping 90-95% of players never even managed to cross that first bridge and enter the castle. The solution to that puzzle just doesn't make any sense, and it's simply not enjoyable to try. My hat's off to anyone that had the skill or the patience to make it this far. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Alright, so we all knew that this game was going to be somewhere on the list. Despite being an 80s kid myself, I never knew about this game until the AVGN did his video. Of course I had to seek it out after that and try it. Now, what can I say? The unresponsive controls and the lack of a defense mechanism makes it a disastrous experience. Moreover, the transition from Jekyll's weak attacks to Hyde's contrasting mechanics leaves you no reaction time. Consequently, you'll find yourself repeatedly dying and have to restart from scratch. Especially if you don't understand the transition mechanic between the two characters. It becomes very frustrating very fast. I know some people praise the game now and claim it's actually good, but come on. When it first came out, no one knew how to play this. This is and was a bad game for the vast majority of gamers. Deadly Towers. Now before I get into this, just quickly, when I was a kid and at my local video store, to rent an NES game, they would have an empty plastic case with a little velcroed badge on it. If the badge was there, the game was available to rent. And what they would do with the plastic case is they would cut just the cover of the box off for the movies and video games. So I didn't even have the back to read to judge if the game would have been good. I only saw the front. And I had to say, yes, I'm going to rent Deadly Towers, it looks good. And you know what? Don't let the Zelda-like appearance fool you. Deadly Towers lacks any charm and polish of that iconic series. The biggest issue is how enemies relentlessly drain your health, making it frustratingly difficult. You're going to find yourself frantically dodging enemies in a maze-like of rooms, deciding whether to persevere or throw in the towel and quit. And let's be honest, after hearing the same musical loop over and over again, giving up might just be the best option for this. I rented it once, and that was it. Flying Warriors. Flying Warriors is another example of a game that brings back memories of those disappointing NES cartridges with some really cool artwork. The game starts off with promising ideas, like a sophisticated fighting system in the tutorial, only to simplify everything on the standard difficulty setting. The game also includes exploration and some NPC interaction, but lacks basic mechanics like a diagonal jump. Instead, you have to jump up and then control your character mid-air like it's on a trapeze or something. There was potential for a good combat game in there, but you have to push through a lot of tedious crap to find it. Next up, Gilligan's Island. Now, Gilligan's Island is memorable for two things: the catchy theme song and Gilligan's annoying presence. Now, the game successfully captures both of these aspects. It combines escort quests and poorly executed comedy games to create a unique and frustrating experience. Picture yourself trapped in a hedge maze with the constant taunting of the most foolish person you've ever encountered, all while trying to navigate your way out. To make matters worse, your legs are tied together. That's essentially what you'd expect from The Adventures of Gilligan's Island, the game. Just this quick blurb can't do this game justice. It's a bad game, but it's one of those games that you have to try for yourself just once to go, oh my god, yeah, this is a bad game. Super Pitfall. Now, there's certainly no shortage of NES games that can be incredibly challenging to the point where they're just not fun and they become frustrating. However, Super Pitfall takes the crown as the ultimate example of this. The developers of Super Pitfall seem to have the belief that people loved video games because they enjoyed listening to repetitive music while constantly dying to obstacles that are nearly impossible to avoid. And just when you thought the level of torment wasn't enough, they decided to include hidden items in the game that are practically invisible and require a stroke of luck to stumble upon. These items are actually necessary for progressing in the game, adding to your frustration. To its credit, Super Pitfall does succeed in creating the feeling of being trapped in a dark and gloomy underground cave. Next up, Where's Waldo? Now, it's really surprising how the Where's Waldo video game fails to capture the essence of the Where's Waldo books, especially since the books weren't exactly literary masterpieces. Completing the game could be an absolute breeze or a lifelong challenge, depending on how quickly you can spot the pixelated Waldo among the other characters. It's amazing how a game with such a straightforward concept can miss the mark, but that was the charm of the NES era. I honestly don't even know what the fix could have been either. It's really just a point and click. So maybe at the very least there should have been dozens of levels for you to play, or at least if they could program a way to have a random Waldo hiding spot so that the levels were fresh every time. Total Recall. Good movies become bad video games. Good video games become bad movies. Why do these two always seem to go hand in hand? And yes, I am saying Total Recall. Arnold Schwarzenegger's Total Recall was a really good movie. Get your ass to Mars. So, Total Recall, the game, was a disappointing side-scrolling action game that fell short in every way possible. Despite advancements in the genre, Acclaim's release of the NES was slow, unattractive, and had tedious combat. The enemies were relentless, making it difficult to land hits on them, while the bosses were surprisingly easy. From the start to the finish, this game was just bland, and left even the biggest Acclaim and Schwarzenegger fans feeling regretful about buying this one. Mario is Missing. Now, I'm not ranking these games like I said, but if I were, this would be in top 10, maybe even in top 5. Now, yeah, there are some bad Mario games out there, but a bad Mario game on the NES? There's just something particularly offensive about a dreadful Mario game on the NES, and it tries to pass itself off as an educational adventure game. On top of all of that, what a tease, that opening intro when we got to see some Super Nintendo graphics. I was tricked. I thought the programmers figured out how to squeeze every last bit of 8-bit juice out of that console. Every aspect of this game is nonsensical, and it's another game that has some great box art. You look at it and you think, this'll probably be a good game. Even now, looking at it on the shelf, I still wonder how it was so bad and boring. And last, Kid Kool. Now, Vic Tokai released Kid Kool in 1990, with the full title being Kid Kool and the Quest for the 7 Wonder Herbs. Now, this game had a lot of potential. It appeared to be a typical 2D platforming game, complete with a cool day and night cycle and 7 different endings. It sounded promising, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. The game is incredibly challenging, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's also very unforgiving. You can't backtrack in the game, which severely hampers your progress, and if you lose your animal weapon friend, they're pretty much gone until the next level. Some levels even look like they're borrowed from the company's previous games. Your character runs way too fast, his jumping sucks, you die way too often and easily. It's almost like the game designers took pleasure in frustrating the players. Kid Kool was actually the #1 written in comment for my Worst NES poll I had last week. And that's gonna do it for my list of 15 of the worst NES games. Now, of course, I'd love to read down in the comments what you think are some of the worst NES games out there, and I'm looking forward to reading why as well. Thanks again for clicking on the video, guys. Take care, and I'll see you in about a week.